Hello everyone and welcome back to the IA English podcast. I'm your host Sarah and I'm so excited for today's episode. Chapter 8. Because we're diving deep into something that connects us all, food. Today's guest is not just a chef. He's a storyteller, an explorer, and an artist in the kitchen. With decades of experience, a calm and thoughtful voice, and a heart full of flavor. He has traveled the world learning and teaching through cuisine. Please welcome the one and only, Michael. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to start at the very beginning. Where are you from, and what is your very first memory of food? Not just eating but truly feeling something because of it.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here. I was born in a small coastal town in southern England, charming, quiet, surrounded by the sea and rolling hills. My family wasn't wealthy, but we had a deep appreciation for simple, honest food. My very first memory related to food, it's actually not in a kitchen, but in a garden. I must have been 5 or 6. My grandmother had this incredible garden behind her house, where she grew everything: carrots, leeks, herbs, strawberries. I remember one summer afternoon, she gave me a tomato that had just been picked from the vine, still warm from the sun. She sliced it, added a little sea salt and olive oil, and handed me a piece. I'll never forget it. The taste was alive. Juicy, sweet, almost electric. That was the moment I realized food could be emotional. That something so simple could make you feel grounded, grateful, connected to nature. That single bite opened something in me that never closed again. It wasn't about technique or fancy presentation. It was about purity, timing, care. And I think that's still at the heart of how I cook today.
That's such a beautiful memory, Michael. I can almost taste that sun-warmed tomato just from the way you describe it. I love how it wasn't about a fancy dish, but about connection. To nature, to family, to something real. Let's stay in that moment a little longer. Can you tell us more about your family? Was food always a central part of your home growing up? Who were the people that shaped your relationship with cooking in those early years?
Absolutely. My family wasn't made up of chefs or restaurant owners, but food was always a part of our rhythm. Especially in the hands of the women in my family, my mother, my grandmother, and even my aunt, who lived just down the road. My grandmother, as I mentioned, was the quiet matriarch of the kitchen. She believed in letting ingredients speak for themselves. She rarely used recipes, she cooked by instinct. Her roast chicken on Sundays, her jams in the autumn, her soups in the winter, they were like rituals. My mother, on the other hand, was more experimental. She worked full-time, but she loved trying new recipes from books or clippings from magazines. I remember her making Indian curry one night and then French onion soup the next. That curiosity rubbed off on me. But what I think shaped me most was the way food brought us together. It wasn't just about nourishment, it was a time when stories were shared. Arguments happened, laughter filled the room, tears even fell, but always around food. And somehow, the meal made everything feel more human. There was one night, I must have been around 10, when we had no electricity due to a storm. My mom lit candles, heated soup over the fireplace, and we all sat on the floor with blankets, eating from bowls and telling stories. It was magical. That night taught me that food isn't about perfection, it's about presence. So in many ways, my family didn't teach me culinary skills, but they gave me something far more important. They taught me why food matters.
That's incredibly touching, Michael. You paint these moments so vividly. It's clear that food was never just food for you, it was memory, emotion, even a kind of language. So let's talk about how that love became a profession. What was the moment when you realized you wanted to become a chef? And how did you take that very first step from being someone?
That's a powerful question, Sarah, because for me, it wasn't one dramatic turning point, it was more like a slow simmer, if I can use a cooking metaphor. In my teenage years, I was still deeply connected to food, but I didn't see it as a career path. I thought I might become a teacher, maybe even a writer. But I kept finding myself in kitchens, helping my mother with dinner, baking bread on Sundays, volunteering at school events just so I could be near the food tables. The real turning point came when I was 16. I got a part-time job washing dishes at a local gastropub, nothing fancy, just stacks of plates and the hum of a busy Friday night. But I was mesmerized. The energy, the fire, the knives chopping in rhythm, it was like theater. I started staying late just to watch the chefs work. And one night, the head chef, a gruff but kind man named Oliver, asked me to help plate a dessert. Just a simple apple crumble with custard. But when I handed that plate to the server, something shifted in me. It was the feeling of creating something, of crafting an experience. From that moment on, I knew. I didn't just want to watch. I wanted to cook. I saved up and enrolled in a culinary program at a small but rigorous school outside London. I was surrounded by other passionate young cooks, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged. The hours were brutal, the standards high, and the criticism sharp, but I loved it. I was exhausted and inspired every single day. That was my first real step, saying yes.
That's such a powerful image, Michael. The young version of you in that pub kitchen, finding your place in the world with a spoonful of apple crumble. So let's talk about culinary school. What was that experience like for you? Was it everything you expected, or were there surprises?
Oh, culinary school, it was both a dream and a battlefield. I went in thinking I knew a lot. After all, I had passion, I had a good palate, and I had spent hours watching real chefs in that gastropub. But very quickly, I realized that cooking professionally is a whole different world. The first thing you learn is discipline. I remember my first week, 5 a.m. knife skills classes, everything had to be perfect. Julienne carrots that were exactly the same size. If your onions weren't diced uniformly, the instructor would dump them out and make you start again. At the time, I found it frustrating, almost harsh. But later, I understood, precision isn't about being fancy, it's about respect. Respect for the food, for the craft, and for the people you're feeding. Then there was the intensity of the kitchen environment. Working under pressure, learning to move quickly and silently, how to communicate without words. It's like learning a second language. You build instincts you didn't even know you had. Like knowing the meat is done just by touching it, or hearing when a sauce is about to boil over. But beyond the technique, culinary school taught me humility. There were days I thought I was doing great, and then I get torn apart during critiques. But that's how you grow. One of my mentors there used to say, you can't build a masterpiece until you've burned a few. And believe me, I burned more than a few. Still, it wasn't all serious. There were moments of joy too, laughing with classmates over failed soufflés, discovering flavors I'd never tasted before, learning how to blend culture into cuisine. That's where I first started experimenting with global ingredients, Japanese miso, Moroccan spices, Peruvian potatoes. It opened my mind. More than anything, culinary school gave me confidence. Not the loud, flashy kind. A quiet confidence. The knowledge that if you respect the process and put in the work.
I love how you describe that quiet confidence, Michael. It's so rare and so powerful. Something that comes only with real experience and a bit of humility. So after all the pressure and growth of culinary school, what came next? What was your very first job as a professional chef like? Was it everything you had imagined? Or were there surprises waiting for you in the real world of kitchens?
Yes, my first official job as a chef. It was intense. Messy. Beautiful. Everything and nothing like I imagined. I was lucky, really. One of my instructors recommended me for a position at a fine dining restaurant in London, not Michelin-starred, but ambitious and full of talent. I started as a commis chef, which basically means you're at the very bottom of the ladder. Your job is to support the real cooks, to prep, to clean, to keep quiet and move fast. I still remember my first day. I walked in wearing a spotless new apron, full of excitement and nerves. Within 2 hours, I had cut myself twice, spilled stock all over my station, and been yelled at by the sous chef for stacking pans incorrectly. It was brutal, but it was real. The pace of a restaurant kitchen is like nothing else. Orders come flying in. Timing is everything. You're on your feet for 12, sometimes 14 hours. Your back aches. Your fingers are burned. And yet, there's magic in it. When the whole brigade is in sync, when the dishes come together perfectly, when the guests are happy, it's like being part of an orchestra. And when you survive a Saturday night service, it feels like winning a marathon. What surprised me most wasn't the stress, it was how much I loved the stress. I found energy in the chaos. But I also quickly learned the importance of mental resilience. One bad night can crush your confidence. One careless mistake can ruin a dish or reputation. I had to develop thick skin and sharp focus. But I'll tell you something, I still remember the first time one of my dishes went out to a customer. It was just a side of seasonal vegetables, nothing fancy. But they came back with a note saying, "Perfectly cooked." Thank you. That little piece of feedback, it meant everything. It reminded me why I was there. That first job taught me that being a chef isn't about ego or glory. It's about showing up, day after day, with care, consistency, and a bit of soul.
That's such a powerful reflection, Michael. I love how even the smallest victories, a perfectly cooked vegetable, a handwritten thank you, can carry such weight in a young chef's journey. So you've taken us through the early years, the discipline, and the adrenaline of your first kitchen. But at some point you started to travel, and not just for pleasure but to truly explore the world through its food. How did that begin? What inspired you to step out of the kitchen and into the world?
Yes, that part of my life truly changed everything. It began a few years after I'd worked my way up in the London kitchen. I was a sous chef by then, respected, stable, even comfortable. But something inside me felt restless. I had mastered the technical aspects, yes, but I realized I was cooking food that I hadn't lived. I could recreate a Moroccan tagine, but I'd never been to North Africa. I could make sushi with precision, but I didn't understand its cultural depth. That bothered me. So I made a decision that shocked a few people. I left my job and booked a one-way ticket to Vietnam. I started modestly, working in tiny street kitchens in Hanoi, where grandmothers taught me to wrap herbs around grilled meats with such care and grace it felt almost spiritual. I wasn't a chef there, I was a student again. And that humility, that beginner's mindset, was the most liberating thing I'd experienced in years. From there, the journey kept unfolding. In India, I learned about layering spices from a family in Kerala who invited me into their home during a festival. In Morocco, I cooked with Berber women in the Atlas Mountains, crushing spices by hand and baking bread in clay ovens. In Peru, I spent weeks in the Andes with a small farming community, learning about native potatoes, some of which had never left the mountain. What struck me in every place was how food wasn't just a meal, it was identity, history, resistance, celebration. Every recipe had a story. Every dish had a memory. And slowly, I began to see my role not just as a chef, but as a connector. Someone who could help tell those stories through food, honestly, respectfully, and with deep gratitude. Travel opened my eyes not just to new ingredients or techniques, but to the humanity of cuisine. It reminded me that we're all just people trying to feed one another with love.
That's breathtaking, Michael. I can feel the soul in every place you visited. Not just the flavors but the people, the stories, the connections. It's so rare to hear a chef speak with such reverence for the world behind the plate. Let's go even deeper. Was there one particular food experience, maybe a moment, a meal, or even a single bite, that truly shook you, changed you, or left a lasting mark on your heart?
Yes, absolutely. There's one moment I'll never forget, and even now, years later, I carry it with me like a quiet truth. It was in southern India, in a small fishing village along the Malabar coast. I had been invited to stay with a local family who ran a modest homestay. They weren't professional chefs, they were fishermen, mothers, neighbors. But the way they approached food was nothing short of sacred. One morning, I was woken up before sunrise. The father of the family, Ravi, invited me to join him on his boat. We drifted into the ocean while the sky was still dark, and I helped him haul in the morning catch. It was hard work, but there was something meditative about it. When we came back, his wife, Amaya, greeted us with fresh coconut water and a wide, knowing smile. She had already started cooking. She made a dish called Meen Wali, a coconut fish curry from Kerala. It's delicate, fragrant, made with curry leaves, turmeric, green chilies, and fresh coconut milk. But what made it unforgettable wasn't just the taste, it was the timing. We had caught the fish less than an hour earlier. The coconuts had just been cracked open. The rice had been steamed over firewood. We sat on the floor, eating with our hands, surrounded by laughter and the hum of village life. And I remember taking one bite and just stopping. Everything faded. The spices weren't overpowering, they were balanced, alive. The fish melted on my tongue. The warmth of the curry, the sweetness of the coconut, the salt from the sea air, it was as if the land and the people were speaking through that dish. I realized then that I had spent so many years trying to perfect food, elevate it, reinvent it, impress people with it. But this meal reminded me that sometimes, the most powerful food is the simplest. The food that belongs to a place. That's made with love, not ego. That's offered, not sold. It changed the way I cook. From that day on, I stopped trying to control food so much. I started listening more, listening to ingredients, to seasons, to culture. That single meal taught me what it really means to be a chef.
Michael, that story honestly gave me goosebumps. It's amazing how one humble dish, made with care and shared in community, can reset everything we think we know about food and about ourselves. So let me ask you this. That moment on the Malabar coast clearly shaped your heart and your hands as a chef. How has that philosophy, that sense of simplicity, presence, and respect, continued to guide the way you create dishes today? How does it live in your kitchen now?
That's such a beautiful question, Sarah, and I think about it often. That experience didn't just change my cooking, it changed my values. Before, I saw food as something to master, to manipulate. Now, I see food as something to honor. And that shows up in every part of my kitchen. First, it starts with ingredients. I work very closely with farmers, fishermen, foragers. I know their names, their families. I visit the soil. I ask questions. I don't just order produce, I form relationships. Because I believe that when you respect where your ingredients come from, they respect you back in flavor, in freshness, in energy. It's no longer just sourcing, it's storytelling. Second, there's the menu design. I don't build a menu around trends or fancy plating. I build it around truth. What's in season? What are the local traditions? What are people craving emotionally, not just physically? Sometimes, I'll remove a popular dish because the ingredients are no longer at their best. It might seem small, but to me, it's essential. Every dish should feel alive. Third, and maybe most importantly, it's about intention. In my kitchen, we take a moment before service to breathe. We talk about the food, the guests, the night. I tell my staff, we're not just cooking, we're hosting life. Every plate we send out is a conversation, a chance to comfort someone, to surprise them, to take them somewhere new. Even if it's just lunch on a Tuesday. I also share stories with my guests. Not in an overwhelming way, but gently. Maybe a note on the menu, or a quick word at the table. If I serve that Meenwali-inspired curry, I'll tell them where the idea came from. I want them to taste the ocean breeze I felt that morning in India. I want them to know that food isn't just a dish, it's a doorway. Ultimately, my philosophy is simple: cook with love, serve with honesty, and let the food do the talking. I believe people can feel the difference. You don't need gold leaf or smoke machines to move someone. You just need real ingredients, prepared with care, and offered with open hands.
Michael, I don't even know how to thank you properly. This conversation has been so rich, so full of heart. You didn't just share knowledge. You shared soul. And I know our listeners are walking away not just hungry, but inspired. It's rare to meet someone who cooks with such intention and speaks with such humility. From the fishing boats in India to the quiet of your kitchen before service, you've reminded us what food is really about: connection, care, and presence. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with? Final thought, maybe.
Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot. If I could leave one thought, it's this: food is not about perfection. It's about presence. Whether you're cooking for 200 guests or for yourself on a quiet night, what matters is that you're there. That you listen to the ingredients. That you cook with respect, not rush. And most of all, that you share it, because food is meant to be shared. I hope that wherever your listeners are, in their kitchens, on their commutes, or out for a walk, they remember that food can be a form of love. And that every meal, no matter how simple, is a chance to tell a story.
That was beautiful, Michael. Thank you again for your stories, your wisdom, and your heart. To everyone listening, this was episode 8 of the IA English podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and today we had the pleasure of sharing time and words with chef and culinary storyteller Michael. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep listening. See you soon.